more likely to get struck by lightning in anywhere, wherever you are, than win the lottery. It's like
they do call it the idiot's tax, because it just.
Welcome to Cloud Realities, an original podcast from Capgemini. This week, it's a conversation show exploring GreenOps, and not just GreenOps, but data. How it sits in the middle of an engineer creating new digital futures, and what information they need to demystify what's going on at the back end and the impact it's having on the planet. I'm Dave Chapman.
I'm Esmee van Giessen.
And I'm Robert Kernahan.
So, welcome everybody. How are you doing today? Robert, how are you doing? You well?
Well, it's very exciting. It's Friday, Dave, isn't it? Everybody's always a bit happier on a Friday.
Esmee, are you happier on a Friday?
Absolutely, and it's finally raining after a hot day, so I'm very happy.
Oh, it's been unseasonably, well, I say unseasonably warm. It's the summer, but it's been almost too warm, hasn't it?
Yeah, that's a classic British expression, isn't it?
Well, it's always that British thing, right? So we always complain about the weather, but if it's 23.5 degrees Celsius, everyone's happy. And if it goes hot, right, that's it, it's too hot. And if it's below that, it's too cold, isn't it? So we could probably get the perfect temperature for 3 hours a year.
I hate to disappoint you, but the Dutchies do exactly the same.
Oh. Is it a Northern European thing? Have we hit on a trend?
It could be a Northern European. Have the Dutch got any good expressions for it, Esmee?
Wow, that's a good question. Raining cats and dogs. We also have that in Dutch, but no, we need something to complain about. I think that's it. It creates a bond, and we use the weather for it.
You always unite behind a common enemy, and it's often the weather. There you go.
That is the truth. Anyway, Robert, what are you confused about this week?
This one's quite a big one, Dave, I'll be honest. And it was a 3 o'clock in the morning type thing that shot through my mind. I went, hang on a minute, how is that going to happen?
Did you wake up and sat bolt upright and then have to sort of cinematically walk around your house in the moonlight?
Just like this buller right now. There was one that played on me a bit. There was so we have AI. It's not really, it's by rote parroting, etc. It's getting better though, right? And there's a lot of conversation going on about artificial general intelligence, and it's not if, it's when.
And the distinction is what, for those who are not familiar with the phrase AGI?
AGI is where you have basically created an entity that can reason and think and learn autonomously. So essentially what we see humans doing, the computer can start to do. That is the definition. So it becomes like a human. It's not the same as a human, but it has the traits of a human. Right. Learning, reasoning, decision-making, etc. Can create novel...
Anger, frustration.
Answers. Well, maybe emotions, who knows, but the ability to reason is the main one, right? And so, when that happens, is it going to be somebody pulling a cloth off a computer and saying, hello to the world, this is the AGI Bob, right? And ta-da, we've created an artificial being. Or is it going to be somebody in a lab somewhere going, oh, it's an AGI? Because of the system does something, and they go, ooh, wasn't supposed to do that, and it's new. And I can't work out which way it's going to. Are we going to fumble in to AGI, or is it going to be a ta-da type moment? And I'm confused about it, Dave.
My take on this is we are definitely going to fumble into it. In fact, we might have already fumbled into it. We just don't know yet.
It's the Terminator story, that is. The AI is out permeating through the system before it reveals itself.
Well, it's things like some things that have already happened that aren't AGI, but perhaps give us insight into how we discover AGI, which is, do you remember that example we talked about on, I think it was on last season, where it might have even been with GPT-3, right? So it wasn't even the most recent wave of tech. And the AI had been given 100 pages of, I don't know, scientific journal or something along those lines to sort of work its way through. And in there, deliberately, there was a line about pizza in the middle of like 100 pages of kind of scientific stuff. And the AI came back with the summary of the 100 pages that had been asked for. But at the end, it said, what was the line about pizza in there for? Are you trying to trick me?
That's quite cool, isn't it? Yeah, there you go. But the other thing is, we assume we're going to create it and it's not going to land from space. That's the very sci-fi version, but it depends how you see it. It could lump onto us from a surprise as well. But yeah, and there's that one where the AIs created their own language when they attempted to interact because it was more efficient. So we see traits of what we consider reasoning. Is it proper reasoning? Don't think we're there yet. but it will arrive. It's just it's the what's the event, and I'm probably siding with you, which is we'll all be surprised when it happens.
A lot of students will be bumped though if that happens. We all try to get through it with a paper that was made up half of it, and then you still got a good grade, and then it actually just points out the pizza part.
Well, that is the truth. What do you think in terms of like AGI revealing itself? Do you think it will choose to reveal itself to us when it is good and ready? Thanks very much. Or do you think the humans will tada the moment?
I think it's not going to happen overnight. It feels a bit like we're watching Kid, the car, or I don't know, Star Wars. So I think we'll be there, right? Or maybe that's also, hopefully we are there and very consciously. So I think step by step, same with GreenOps for 55 years. I think it will go fast, but no, I think we're there. Yeah.
Talking of GreenOps, let's get on to the main subject of the show today, where we're going to examine a little bit about GreenOps, both where it's come from and what the state of the art is beginning to look like. I am delighted to say that joining us to talk about that is James Hall, who's the head of GreenOps at Green Pixie. James, how you doing? Thank you for joining us. Do you want to introduce yourself and say a word about Green Pixie?
All right. Thanks for having me. I'm James. I've been head of GreenOps at Green Pixie. A lot of people do ask what does a head of GreenOps actually do? A lot of it is working on, our methodology of how we work out this emissions data, but it's also how do you create an actual business case for companies to get GreenOps involved in their companies? Why should they do GreenOps? And ultimately, how do you make GreenOps practical? Not just, you should be more sustainable, but is how do you become more sustainable and why is it actually worth it?
So, James, just give us a bit of background on Green Pixie. Where are you up to and what's your mission?
So our mission, I think I'll start there, is to essentially get high quality data in front of the people who need it and ultimately enable engineers to reduce thousands of tons of emissions from behind their laptop. Because we saw a really interesting opportunity in cloud where it's really easy to emit by mistake. Like you can make a mistake in your code and accidentally emit 1,000 tons because you've got 20 terrible servers running at the same time. But it's just as easy to fix. And our mission is to enable these people to get some visibility on what the impact of the cloud is and also help them come up with reduction strategies around it.
So if I'm an engineer in that particular one, I entirely applaud the pointing this specifically at engineers and trying to deal with the code issue, which is a very key aspect of sustainable technology and something that, we're only emerging into. So how does it show up to engineers? How does the fact that you unveil data to them show up differently from just, say, like a flat dashboard?
Well, I mean, the whole emergence of hyperscale cloud kind of made the buying cycle and the decision-making cadence go from a couple of months having to sign paperwork through procurement to, whoops, I've just spent £10,000. So the level of data that engineers need to make decisions kind of completely changed from, needing a once a month dashboard to essentially needing hourly data with a lot of nuance between like what's the different type of servers, all these different locations you can choose from just by accident. So it's about how do you get really high quality data that's very detailed and nuanced specifically for the cloud in front of these people, because that's the kind of data they're used to looking at from a usage and cost perspective. So you need the sustainability data to match.
And I suppose when you think about good efficiency in cloud, it starts with before you've cut a line of code, you've got a pattern that's efficient, etc. And you go down and then you can observe in live and repeat. Do you think it's that people want to be efficient, but they haven't got the information they need? Or is there a cycle where you have to push it to them and then educate? What's the position you find when people get hold of this? And how does that maturity cycle work from becoming aware to being able to take action and then sort of get all the correct decisioning in the right place?
Well, I mean, from my perspective, efficiency, people know what it is. It's quite intuitive, reducing emissions in the cloud, I think it is quite intuitive. Like, what's more emissions? 10 big servers or like one small one because you've kind of right-sized? But I think there's a problem with the with the incentives, or essentially how engineers are KPI'd, because you've got finance teams worried about budget and costs and reducing the bottom line. But the engineers are told to make sure that the app performs well and there's no latency and there's no downtime.
Yeah, experience is king in that debacle, isn't it? Yeah.
And they're kind of the antithesis of each other, unless they're like really well communicated. But I see sustainability as that kind of gap, because a well cost performing application is most likely going to be highly optimized from a carbon perspective. And a well performing application is also going to be, well, actually saying that. If you want the engineers to take the amount of usage and the performance into account, there's a balance you need to strike between like what is a cost-effective but also well-performing application. And finding that balance, I think, takes a lot of time. And engineers typically don't really care that much about cost when their KPIs are around performance. So when you're putting that sustainability data in front of them, you're kind of changing the way they view their usage and making the units essentially more meaningful to them, because they want a well-performing app, but they also don't want to emit with everything they do. So it kind of creates an incentive to find that balance between not just going overboard with performance, but also scaling it down to something that hits both marks.
So dipping into that data a little bit more deeply then, what is it for you that characterizes an interesting data set beyond, hey, you're using X instances on the cloud?
Well, I think there's almost two avenues that I've discovered when kind of looking at GreenOps, because you can get the data to the engineers, but ultimately an organization won't really adopt CO2 data unless it's been approved by the ESG teams. And likewise, ESG teams, the environmental, social and governance team. So essentially what is a sustainability team in this case?
Yeah.
So the sustainability team have certain data requirements. And if anything has got CO2 written on it, you can expect a company to want the sign off from the sustainability teams. But likewise, if you want engineers to actually make decisions with this data, they have certain data requirements. So, the kind of principles we follow from a sustainability perspective is making sure that the data is kind of follow what the greenhouse gas protocol's pillars are, but it's ensuring that the data is transparent, accurate, consistent, relevant, and complete are the main pillars of what the greenhouse gas would recommend.
Right.
And this, I think a lot of people focus a lot on the accuracy piece, but actually all of the pillars are equally as important, because if you're an engineering team looking at one product and a couple of resources, and all you've got is the total CO2 of your entire environment, that detail is not really particularly relevant to you and your team.
So you just take us through the 5 pillars again. We skipped over that quite quick, but I just want to just take us a little bit more deeply into that. And then how do you actually shape the data to support those 5 pillars? Like, are you getting that data freely from, say, like cloud service providers? Are you having to do, some form of magic in the middle to try and get it into that sort of shape? Just Robert's smirking at my
I love it. Magic in the middle. I'm going to use that. That's the new terminology for middleware, and that's my new sales pitch. It's not middleware anymore because that sounds dead and boring. But if I talk to you about magic in the middle, you're going to want to buy that, aren't you?
My friend,
let's have a few of those.
Automagical transformation. That's where you want to be.
We need to start our list again. We need the season 4 list of crazy good words and phrases.
So you take us into it and just unpack the magic for us a bit, James.
Well, it's funny. We actually did used to call the Green Pixie magic. That's kind of why we landed on Green Pixie in the early days.
Look at that.
Because what we did was magic in the middle. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, ultimately looking at these 5 pillars, it's all about making the data as useful as possible. So to kind of unpack some of or to dig into each one, the transparency is super important, because ultimately people won't make decisions on data they don't understand where it's come from, essentially. Because if you can give someone a number, but if there's no paper trail as to what assumptions have you made, where has this data come from? How does it actually align with kind of what data I'm already looking at? Then it won't be used to drive different decisions. And in terms of consistency, it's got to be the same methodology across teams, across departments, even across different cloud providers, which is why kind of where we've come in is built our own methodology that we can actually use across different cloud providers, even apply it to someone's on-premise and their other environments to ensure they've got some kind of apples to apples comparison across what they're doing.
How does the data show up then to an engineer? So what I'm trying to get to is you're abstracting the information, you're using a model like the 5 columns as your model for what the right data is. How is it showing up to me as an engineer, and how do I integrate that into my dev flow?
So we basically deal in that raw data. We've kind of designed it to align exactly with the data they're already looking at. So these are the extremely detailed usage reports that come directly out of the cloud providers.
Is this going to be a bit like reading a manual? like when you get something new and you're like, well, I could read the manual, or I could just go directly into fiddling with it and try and make the thing work. And then, if I really need to, I'll go and read the manual. How do you get past that kind of human, the human nature of not wanting to read all of this stuff before you just crack on?
Well, I mean, there isn't really a GreenOps manual, to be honest. I kind of mentioned earlier, GreenOps and cloud sustainability, it is intuitive, Do you think that, getting a 50% discount on your cloud would reduce emissions? Probably not. But would changing storage tiers, turning off unused servers, will these things push the needle towards more sustainable and less wastage? And there's that kind of showing them the data almost flicks a switch there, where you start associating, okay, these are things I've actually been asked to do, build in serverless, reduce or right size servers. And I can see that there's actually a carbon impact. So I'm going to start focusing more on these kinds of things.
Have you got a couple of case studies that kind of illustrate both the green impact that doing this can have in terms of your emissions as an organization, but also perhaps some of the developer culture, like how their developer culture might have changed as a result of getting access to this stuff?
We're doing some interesting work at the moment with Cabinet Office and Government Digital Service, and they've got a cloud-first approach, but since they're a public sector, they've also got very strict net zero goals. But they are an interesting case because they had an efficient by design policy from the start. So the work we're doing with them is actually almost justifying their decision. They've already built in serverless from the get-go. What we're doing now is kind of measuring and seeing how much carbon they've actually avoided from the start, and encouraging more departments to adopt this more serverless approach.
You maybe not be able to share the exact numbers, and that's absolutely fine, but maybe you can help us with percentages or something like that. Just give us a sense of scale. Like, are organizations saving 5% of emissions, or is it more like 75%? What does it look like? I'm just trying to get a frame of reference.
It kind of depends on how mature and how optimized they are from the start. Because also you're within your organization's bounds of what you can actually do. Like, it'd be great if everyone could move all their regions to France because they've got mostly nuclear energy in their grid. But 90% of companies either can't do that because of policy, or it's too expensive to do that. So what can you actually do? And there's some stats around there. Like, I think Flexera found that around 32% of cloud usage is waste. So I'd say if you're 32?
Just
yeah, that's what they say.
Do you think it was more or less, Robert?
When you talk about waste, that's quite a strong word because it is completely superfluous. So 32% in production environment overhead is one thing, but waste is completely unneeded, even that. And it's like, that is excessive. That's still very high. I would have thought, I hoped somewhere deep inside my mind that it would be less than that, but because there's the total cost of ownership argument where it's human efficiency and all that sort of stuff, which also helps in this space. But the actual cloud consumption, 30% still over spec, do you think?
I would imagine, given we're on the on the precipice of scale AI, that number is small in comparison to where it's likely to end up.
Well, I can actually absolutely understand that on C-level, this resonates very well with cost reduction. And if you hear like the numbers like, wow, waste 30%, how is that going to, bring me back money? What is your key stakeholder that you have your first conversation with about these topics?
So we would typically kind of engage that cloud cost optimization team because ultimately the way I see FinOps and cloud optimization is they're like kind of a culture thing. So you're essentially marketing, efficiency to your engineers, and sustainability just becomes another tool in the tool belt of the people trying to shift the needle with the people who make decisions. So, ultimately you can have all the top level exec buy-in and best practices all you want, but if the people on the ground are not interested in making different decisions or spending a bit of time trying to do something different, then ultimately it's not going to move the needle. So how do you incentivize them? How do you market the idea of more efficiency? How do you market the idea of building efficiently from the get-go? And just on the topic still of kind of what is the potential, I think in terms of like reducing and waste, you're pretty much capped at like 30%. But the interesting part comes in how much carbon can you avoid by looking at this kind of data from the start? That if you've got a choice between building in serverless or building on standard servers, and the easy option is to go straight for monolithic, but you could save 90% of your carbon if you put a bit more time into planning it around serverless. Could that be enough to shift the needle for the people building the future products, not just the people going in and trying to fix what's already been built?
Esmee, what have you been looking at this week?
Well, obviously, the GreenOps triggered me as well to dig deeper on the topic itself. And I'm quite a media archeologist by heart. I'm just fascinated about how...
A media archeologist?
Yeah.
What's one of them? I don't know. I'm learning.
This is a whole new level we're getting into.
I am
here.
learning. Please unpack.
Picturing Indiana Jones. Is
that
accurate?
but
go on.
differently. Right. Esmee, what is a media archeologist? Let's start with that.
Yeah, that's just digging deep on how media emerges and also more of the cultural aspect of it, the social aspect, right? When electricity was just there, they were actually afraid of electricity, the people, because they thought it was something Christianity or that it was God, punishing them.
Hang on, you're telling me it isn't?
I think also on the warning of electricity was dangerous. Still, I would advise you not to stick your fingers in sockets. There's still a warning.
I've done that 5 or 6 times and it hurts every time.
Oh, gosh.
There's a learning there, David.
But also, if you look at GreenOps, that those terms, or at least the first signs of it, has already been like 55 years old. So it's the same with AI. It's already 50 years that people are doing research and that it starts to emerge. But I think now with technology taking such a fast pace, we actually start to see it more often and it really integrates in everything.
Hang on. You found the first use of the term GreenOps 55 years ago, is that right?
Yeah, in 1970s.
This is almost the level of breakthrough definitional stuff as Rob's breakdown of the derivation of the word toilet.
I know an older version of GreenOps, because if you go on the Wikipedia page, it's actually the name of some kind of ancient trilobite that's multi-million years old. So you can find GreenOps artifacts hidden in stones in the ocean if you look hard enough.
That's fascinating, right? So the topic itself, I think that so you always see already first signs of GreenOps. So that was something that makes my heart pump, because I really like how we think things are so fast and arising like yesterday. But if we really dig deep, there's already signs way, way, way back.
Just to point out, though, Dave is still older than the phrase you've used. Just to bring that to everyone's attention.
I didn't want to,
You didn't want to say, did you? But
no.
It's true, though.
It's amazing. I've been thinking about GreenOps since I was 8, Rob. Right, I'm on top of it. I don't think it's, as a discipline, it hasn't moved as fast as I hoped it would, though. What was the original inception of it, Esmee? Did you get to that? Like, why did it come about?
Yeah, industrial activity. So especially, with all the factories and the impact on the environment, the green operations, that's where it came from. And now that we see technology, move into everything that we do, you see GreenOps slowly turning into each and every company. So that's when it emerges. It's more environmental impact back in the days already.
It does amaze me that it's taken us, on a serious note, as long as it has to get here. And the fact that in the world of IT, up until very, very recently, and I'm going to say maybe the last 5 years, it might be slightly longer than that. Things like, how much a search on the internet, costs in terms of processing power and carbon emissions just wasn't really well understood, right? So, Rob, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Uh-oh, don't do that.
What is a search on the internet equivalent to in a carbon emission?
Right, Dave, why don't you think of the most impossible question to answer and then ask me on a podcast? Because if you think about that, just think about the sprawl of that. So I will take you through what has to happen. So there's the cost of you running your computer and clicking the button and taking ages on. And I know a few times, Dave, I've had to use Let Me Google that for you. Yeah. That then has to go across as an ISP impact. And then there's a whole data model in Google that has to be searched. If it's a simple search, it'll be pre-cached and it's popular. So if you're talking about Taylor Swift, then they'll have that in the thing. But if you ask for something totally obscure, it's going to go down into the annals of some search, take a bit longer, storage has to whir up and everything and Bing, and then it all comes back. So to answer that question, I'd need to have deep insight into the architecture that's Google deployed. So I'm going to politely decline and say, I don't have a Scooby-Doo.
You'd need to know which location as well.
Exactly. It's like, what?
Esmee, have you ever heard a longer duck than that?
No, that was just a way of I have no idea in long words.
And then obviously you times that by the billions of searches going on each day. And obviously you got an impact. And I'm sure Google have a good idea of that and they'll want to optimize.
There's a fairly well-known sort of apocryphal, measure of it. I wonder if anyone else, including you, Marcel.
No, go on. Surprise us.
Same as boiling a kettle.
What?
Each search is supposedly takes the same energy as boiling a kettle.
I suppose it's an interesting stat. Where did that come from? What's the efficacy of that stat? I have lots of questions. Right? That's a lot of energy.
Don't come back at me with your fact-based nonsense, Robert.
Yes, considering all the data transfer, the data storage. But it's probably wiser to say it's the same electricity because, doing, as I said, boiling a kettle in France, you're probably kind of tiny amounts of CO2 because the grid makeup is all lovely and clean.
It's good
doing it, in the Middle East, probably a different story.
But what really struck me about that, and on a serious note, I can't remember, might try and dig it out for the show notes, but what really struck me was you do searches without even thinking about it, right?
Even worse, Dave, search behavior is moving from a traditional search engine, which is massively optimized, across to AI engines, which use dramatically more processing power, but you do get a better, more verbose answer, and it provokes a conversation. So actually, changing search behavior is going to make that worse, not better, because we're seeking the better results. It's amazing that a calculator, which is solar powered, can do that for you much quicker, isn't it? Right tool, right jobs. That's what we want.
Because I also worry about the hallucination from Gemini's search. I would just probably skip that because it's like, is that even true? What kind of stupid article have you got that from? I want to go read it myself anyway.
So I asked it a question the other day, and it was about the Olympics and the medal tables and whatever else. And I asked, to cut things down and do some data. And then I thought I said, where did you get your sources from? Because you can do that now. So it sends you its sources. And it had used a really obscure paper written ages ago by some university to get all its data from. And it sourced its response from what I would class as a rather eclectic source. And then you sort of go, hang on a minute. And then you sort of go down the rabbit hole of, is that source good or not? But you're absolutely
even
right.
more eclectic than your magazine collection, Rob.
Well, on the history of the Olympics, yes, David.
Let's say that.
Did the source really exist? Because you also see that it just makes up sources and authors.
In this case, it did, but it was an academic paper using Olympic data to do something. I was like, they've gone to a really weird place to find the answer.
what I think was interesting about that conversation is the fact that GreenOps has been around a minimum of about 50 years, yet we still have this obfuscation between the use of digital technology and then ultimately the impacts of digital technology, and not least the cost sitting in there somewhere in the middle, but more profoundly the impact on the earth. So I think sitting in the middle with some magic and some data and trying to expose that and make that much more well understood, it's got to be a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
So James, thank you very much for joining us today and sharing the magic with us a little bit.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Now, we end every episode of this podcast by asking our guest what they're excited about doing next. And that could be, I've got an exciting new record arriving in the post at the weekend, or it could be something in your professional life. So James, what are you excited about doing next?
I guess I'm looking forward to dry August ending, actually, at this rate.
You know what? I would be looking forward to that too. I'm not going to lie.
You're only halfway through. I'm sorry to deaden the mood, but
I've already had multiple drinks this weekend.
Maybe it's dry August is the thing that sucked all the joy out of your life, James. I'm just putting that out there.
Maybe. But as you said, it's your girlfriend saying you can't do it. So
it's peer pressure, isn't it?
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, it is good for you to do that every now and again on a number of different levels. So we wish you the best of luck getting through the rest of August. By the time the show goes out, of course, August will be a distant memory, James.
Yes, lovely.
If you would like to discuss any of the issues on this week's show and how they might impact you and your business, please get in touch with us at cloudrealities@capgemini.com. We're all on X and LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you, so feel free to connect and DM if you have any questions for the show to tackle. And, of course, please rate and subscribe. It really helps us improve the show. A huge thanks to James, our sound and editing wizards Ben and Louie, our producer Marcel, and, of course, to all our listeners. See you in another reality next week.